Good morning and welcome. I'm Caitlin Barr, the CEO of Better Hearing Australia Victoria, and I'm delighted that you're spending your Tuesday morning with a coffee with me to celebrate the transformation conversation of Better Hearing Australia Victoria. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which I work and live, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the land on which you find yourself today. We acknowledge their elders past, present and future, and find ourselves thinking of them often at this difficult time. So, we find ourselves coming together virtually at what we hope is the tail end of perhaps the strangest society-wide experience of our lives. But there are many things we can reflect on post-COVID. One of those being the unique collective experience we have of isolation. And I'd like to bring the link between our experience of isolation, this kind of accidental empathy we have, with what it might be like to live daily with hearing conditions. We've invited you here for two reasons. The first is to witness the transformation of Better Hearing Australia into something new. And secondly, to actually start a conversation about transformation and change much bigger than us. We're calling this the More Than Just Ears conversation. So why are we having these two changes? Why do we want to have this conversation? Well, we see one big problem, and that is that society and the system as it stands is just not meeting the needs of people with hearing conditions today or tomorrow. People with hearing conditions find themselves facing inequalities and isolation daily, whereas what we should be aiming for is hearing equality, where everyone has access to connection, to participation and communication without limitation due to hearing. So why is this a problem? Why is this happening? We see three reasons. But hearing equality needs the community and it needs society to have empathy for ears. This is a social model of disability. Look, hearing conditions are one of the most common chronic health conditions in Australia. It costs us an estimated $15.9 billion economically, 17.4 billion from lost well-being and an additional 12.8 in lost productivity. Yet, society treats hearing conditions as invisible. I mean, we see it daily. From the cafe that might have great coffee, it's designed for socialising but forgets what you need to be able to communicate, to the open plan workplace, school, to dad being left out of conversations because it's too hard for the family to navigate when things go wrong, to no one wearing earplugs at the nightclub, to not getting a job because you misheard the interview question, or perhaps not learning English at the same speed as your peers when you first arrive in Australia, or not being able to see the critical visual cues that you rely on because your doctor's wearing a mask and perhaps you misunderstand life-altering news. The second reason is that hearing conditions are about more than just ears. Hearing conditions have vast social and emotional impacts, and these are widely under-acknowledged. We know, and the research tells us, that people with hearing conditions often have fewer educational and job opportunities, find themselves with other physical health conditions and have reduced access to additional services. We also know that people with hearing conditions often have relational challenges, communication breakdown, and ultimately reduced emotional and mental health. In a survey we did just a few weeks ago, we actually found that 85% of respondents, people with hearing conditions, said they felt isolated and lonely, often or always. And 70% of those people also said they felt anxious and depressed, often or always. People with hearing conditions are about more than just ears. The impacts are on the whole person and the people around them, even if they're wearing a hearing aid. Equality in hearing is about more than just devices. And yet, the current system is that if you have a hearing condition, you visit a model that is retailized and device-focused and often costly. This model is based on the notion that a hearing aid or a cochlear implant is a fix, but we know that's not the case from the research and people's experiences. While providing even the most amazing technological fixes is necessary, It isn't a fix to what is a very complex and human problem. And consequently, there are many people for whom there isn't appropriate services available, or they're excluded from accessing services due to cultural, language, financial, or other health reasons. These three reasons are adaptive, they're complex, and they require a systems-wide and people-centred approach, and someone willing to do the work. We need to put people with hearing conditions at the centre to solve this problem. We need to understand how we can serve the diverse needs of the community, and we need to think beyond what that individual's responsibility is. We need to think about what we all need to do to make change. Devices are part of the solutions, and solving technological challenges needs to continue. There's incredible innovation happening there. But these improvements will not ultimately overcome the deeper barriers that cause hearing inequality, exclusion, and isolation. The harder work requires us to adapt our thinking, to look at changing behaviours and motivations and skills. The hard work is to change how society sees its role, how the system works. Business models and policy need to be about people, not ears, and not devices, and not profits. The hard work is having the conversations about how we ensure society understands that we all play a role in reducing the social and emotional impacts of hearing conditions, and that we need a system that supports this. The board and I recently confirmed that Better Hearing Australia Victoria's 88-year-old vision and mission to eliminate the social and emotional impacts of hearing conditions is as important as ever. But this mission and commitment demanded us to reflect on our approach, the work that we do, how we interact with the community, and we realised it was time to evolve. For more than 85 years, this organisation has played a vital role in supporting individuals live life with hearing conditions. And today we embark on a new future because we want to do more. As well as assisting individuals, we want to assist the people around them. We want to help society make this change. We want to create a world of sound accessibility for everyone, and particularly those most vulnerable. To do that, we need to do more than speak up. We need to do more than make some noise. We need to really start these hard conversations and do the work. We're going to connect with people, create new solutions, and make changes not just for the benefit of individuals, but for all of society. And we believe that all of us on this call, people with hearing loss, the general public, health professionals, businesses, governments, we can all do more. We all need to be part of this conversation with people with hearing loss at the centre. We believe that a world with hearing equality is possible. We think it's fair. How does it sound to you?
You can't hear, things can be a bit scary sometimes. When I first got told, Mum, something's not right, you're not normal. It really, really hurt. I thought, what's wrong with me? Why am I not normal? When there's noise, I can barely hear anyone talking. Yeah, I had to do a lot of lip reading. Yeah, I want my family to understand what it's like and how hard it has been for me, and making me feel like it was part of my personality, which it isn't really. It's not me, and they should have known who I really was, that I was caring and listening to people, and realised it was my hearing that had stopped that.
No one realises it's a battle, it is a struggle every day to live with this auditory torment. In the first 6 months, I was really, really scared. I was very fragile, and I stayed home. When I think back, more often than I went out at the time. It's very, very challenging, but it's invisible to other people. That's why it's, I think, ignored, and people just think, you're coping, you're all right. I don't want to cope. I want to live life. I don't want to have to just cope with life.
As a pioneer, I know I'm committing to more than just ears. I'm committing to reimagining how we offer a whole person experience to someone who has a hearing condition.
After working in the field of audiology for more than 10 years and being involved in research and education as well as service provision, I've come to learn that this focus on the hearing aid and on the individual isn't enough. Person-centred care, to me, means considering your needs in the context of where you are and how you want to receive care. In the case of hearing care, it means not just thinking about ears and not just thinking about devices. It means thinking, what do you need for your emotional and social well-being, for your spiritual well-being, how you see yourself, but also culturally, what's right for you and what is it that you need at that point in time. People living with hearing conditions are unable to be part of the social group, be part of their communities. Now is a fantastic time to be part of making society different, making society see hearing conditions differently. And we want to create change together.
We welcome all community members to join us and become pioneers.
Sound fair to you? Sounds fair to me.
That sounds fair to me now, yeah.
Introducing Soundfair, the evolution of Better Hearing Australia Victoria into what it needs to be to make change in the future. You know, the experience of co-creating identity for our organisation was an amazing one. We had a group of people with different perspectives and experiences in the room, and what we realised was that central to the work that needs to be done in the future is asking questions. By putting a question mark at the centre of our logo, we're indicating that we should always ask ourselves and ask others, are you empowering hearing equality? Are we empowering hearing equality? What else do we need to be doing? Conversations start with a question. Questions beg answers and answers feed change. This logo is our conversation starter, our invitation for you to engage with us, for people with hearing conditions to engage with you, and for you to engage with people with hearing conditions. Beyond our transformation, our look, feel and sound, there are changes to the work that we do. Here's a snapshot of what we'll be doing to empower hearing equality. Through our community initiatives, we'll deliver a hearing equality program that is physically and culturally accessible, affordable and focused on inclusion, not just devices. Through our professional services, we'll deliver social health and emotional wellbeing programs that are tailored to people with hearing conditions, and these will be available to the public and health professionals. We're going to put these two things together. We're going to reimagine what the hearing system could look like, and we're going to co-create a social model of hearing care that's about community, whole people and their wellbeing, not just ears. And lastly, we're going to create a movement of people, leaders, innovators, all of us. And we're going to invest in these skills and give opportunities to be part of co-creating change and doing the hard work that I mentioned. By doing this, we're enabling the work is shared, but also making sure that the solutions are by all and for all. Soundfair is built on putting people with hearing conditions at the centre of the conversation. And we have reached this point with the incredible support of many people, to whom I'm very grateful. Core to this group are our members, our clients, and our supporters. And now I'd like to take the opportunity to put you in their safe hands so they can tell you what Soundfair and being a pioneer means to them and what role they are going to play in doing this hard work in the future. Over to our Soundfair pioneer advocates.
My experience as someone who suffered hearing loss and the position that I have makes me, I think, an ideal spot to be a pioneer, to not only advocate for people who have hearing loss, but to be in a position to formulate policy that best serve people that do have a hearing loss. You might be surprised to know that nearly 4 million Australians, which is about 15% of our population, suffer hearing loss. So it's a large number of people. It's important that we recognise that the needs for people with hearing loss are important. It's important as a government that we have policies to address those issues, and it's important for me as a minister in that government to have an understanding of what it means.
Like many people, it took too long to address my hearing. It didn't, however, take all that long to realise that hearing aids weren't going to restore my hearing to 100%. And that was really quite disappointing because the advertisements had suggested that it would. Anyway, that's where Soundfair can help. They show how hearing conditions don't necessarily have to be an obstacle, and they work with you and the community to make sure that this is so. I'm delighted to be one of their hearing pioneers.
I have also worn hearing aids since I was 10 years old, and as someone who was ashamed to wear my hearing aids for so many years, I'm incredibly passionate about changing the conversations and perceptions around hearing loss and hearing health. I am super excited to be part of Soundfair's pioneer movement, as I 100% share the same goals and attitude that hearing conditions are about far more than just ears. I'm really looking forward to working with Soundfair to build these conversations and to ultimately work towards ensuring that we have hearing equality in Australia.
All of my education and research work for many years has been about making hearing care for adults and children accessible to them and their families. And by that I really mean that we form partnerships with our clients and with their families. And that's why I'm so excited to be a pioneer.
Hearing equality is incredibly important and has been an ongoing passion of mine. At Audiology Australia, we believe that everyone has the right to communicate and interact with the world in ways that are fulfilling and meaningful to them. Unfortunately, all too often, there are social barriers to be overcome that exist beyond individual hearing loss. That's why I'm excited to be part of Pioneers, so that together we can work to eliminate the social and emotional barriers that come with hearing loss, such as discrimination, marginalisation and isolation. Sounds fair to me.
Having grown up with a mother who was a teacher that specialised in working with children with hearing loss and impairment, I learned early on the importance of creating an environment that provides equal opportunity, so that everyone living with a hearing condition can be the best version of themselves. To be a pioneer and to be part of a movement that will support the social and emotional well-being of people living with a hearing condition and that looks to create real systems change is genuinely exciting. I look forward to contributing to that movement in any way that I can, and with 1 in 6 Australians suffering from hearing loss, you can be rest assured that this movement will not only impact those with a hearing condition, but society as a whole.
I was inspired to work in the area because my father lost his hearing as a very young man, and that made a big impact on me as I was growing up. I think all people should have access to hearing, really keen to see the barriers to good hearing reduced. I also work with Rotary International in their action group on hearing and with Rotary Club of Melbourne, so I'm hoping we can help.
My dad suffered from hearing loss, didn't really understand the full impact of it, but now I've got a much better idea. So please come along on the journey with us, and I think there should be some great benefits for everyone.
I'm Liselotte Bundesen, and I'm the Managing Director of the IDA Institute in Denmark. It gives me great joy to announce IDA Institute's partnership with Soundfair. At IDA Institute, we have for more than a decade been building a community that embraces person-centered care and empowers people with hearing loss to get the hearing care they need. Soundfair's determination to create accessibility and a sense of social, emotional and cultural belonging for people with hearing loss makes Soundfair a natural fit for us as a partner. It is a purpose that we support wholeheartedly.
I spent the last 40 years working as a noise and vibration specialist, and sadly I have seen firsthand what deafness can do to people socially and emotionally. I've seen firsthand how excessive noise and vibration can interfere with people's health and well-being, and I've heard firsthand how awful some of our public spaces are for noisiness. I've also heard firsthand how central sound is to many art forms, and I've been very privileged to have designed a few concert halls and theatres myself, and I've seen the joy that good sound can bring to people. My day job involves designing with sound. This is a process that involves skill and science and aesthetics.
The name is Soundfair, and I think that sounds fair, don't you? It sounds fair to me to make hearing a national health priority and really look after our community, the 1 in 6 people in Australia who suffer emotional and mental anxiety and negative impacts from being isolated due to hearing loss and hearing health conditions.
So by now, you're probably wondering how you can be part of this change, how you can be part of the work that needs to be done. Well, I invite you now to join us as we start the More Than Just Ears conversation. We've brought together 3 wonderful minds, 3 leaders in their own right, who will start asking the hard questions and providing some answers to give us an idea of what work needs to be done. So with a half full coffee, I will introduce you to John Hugan, who will facilitate this conversation and a deeper leadership conversation in a few weeks' time. John comes to us after starting his career in the hearing sector before moving into senior management in CEO and board roles across the country. John is a leadership and strategy and impact expert, but at his core, he's passionate about inclusion. Over to you, John.
Oh, well, thanks, Caitlin. It's great to be here. And congratulations, Soundfair, on the brand launch. Looking fantastic, I reckon. And even more congratulations are in order, I think, for your willingness to tackle the hard challenges that need to be overcome, if people with hearing conditions are to be fully included and supported. And that's what this short discussion is about, how to make progress on that hard challenge. Now, you may have noticed along the way that Caitlin had delineated between technical and adaptive challenges, terms that come from the adaptive leadership framework, which we'll touch upon during the session and explain as we go. Because this is fundamentally about achieving change and transformation. Leadership is very much part of making that happen, and we can all be part of that to make that happen. So we've got a half an hour or so to begin to explore what's needed. So let's get going. I'm going to introduce the panel, and then just to let you know what's coming after that, there's some challenge questions and we'll have some discussion and see what falls out. So it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panellists, a panel of deep collective insight, I believe. So we have Dave Brady, the CEO of Hear For You and chair of Deafness Forum and a hearing advocate. So welcome, Dave. And we have Kate Disher-Quill, photographer and author of Earshot, a photographic collection of stories on deafness and hearing loss. So welcome, Kate. And we have as our third panellist, Mark Truong, student audiologist and host of the Hear Me Out podcast. Welcome, Mark. So thank you very much for your time today, and perhaps we could have a virtual round of applause for our panellists. So there you go. So I mentioned adaptive leadership before, and it's a way of thinking and tackling challenging problems. The first step is to get on the balcony, to get above the everyday effort and busyness and observe and think. And in a sense, that's what we're doing for this short time today. To consider the challenge, diagnose the challenge. So let's get into it. First to you, Kate. What do you think is the greatest challenge in achieving the sort of wider societal and system change that Soundfair and Caitlin are talking about, the change needed to achieve hearing equality?
Great question, and I think Soundfair's doing an amazing job at tackling what I'm about to, I think, is the greatest challenge. And essentially, I think it kind of is might be confronting for many people to hear, but I think that the audiology industry needs to acknowledge their failures and to give a voice to deaf and hard of hearing people in this space. And I don't mean physically learning to speak. I mean ensuring that our experiences and our needs are understood. I think it's an industry where innovation and decision making has been predominantly led by people who are hearing, and an industry which has tried to eradicate the problem of deafness rather than trying to solve the societal issue, which is stigma towards deafness.
Right.
And yeah, I think the idea that technology will cure deafness is something that people really need to shift their understanding, and that way of thinking clearly hasn't worked. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, Mark, what do you think? You were nodding along. What are your thoughts?
I totally agree. I think we've been trying to use technology solutions to solve a lot of the problems that we have with hearing loss and in the audiology industry. And I think there's a real need for players along the whole chain, including clinicians, clients, manufacturers, legislators, to initiate change. And I think as we've seen in the COVID-19 period, I think one of the major things which do drive change is the financials. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how events like COVID and events like OTCs coming up are going to drive audiologists to change and develop themselves as clinicians in order to better serve the deaf community.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, the dreaded business model's got to work at the end of the day, right? Yeah. So, Dave, what are your thoughts? I mean, you're an advocate for people living with hearing conditions. What would you describe as the biggest challenge? Short and sharp, Dave. Imagine you're at the top of an elevator, 45 seconds to the bottom.
You got me on 45 seconds, and I'll tell you the most important thing is conversation. We never ever had the real conversation about hearing loss in this country. We talk about it as a sideshow. We talk about it as a miracle on the audiology front. We talk about it when we see the magic switch-ons for cochlear implants and hearing aid. They're actually not magic switch-ons. They're actually switch-ons that actually sound going in someone's ear. Powerful, yes, but also confusing because we never had the conversation. The other thing is when we go into the political mindset of the federal and state governments, hearing loss is one of the largest disabilities in this country. We have 4 million Australians with some form of hearing loss. Unfortunately, it is at the bottom of any major reform. And we've been working over this for a long, long time. In hearing health, national priority, we have a roadmap, but now we've got an exciting opportunity here to start another level of conversation through the community. Well done, and we look forward to hearing more.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks, Dave. I mean, it's really interesting. I think you sort of highlighted the very fact that this is an adaptive challenge because there's sort of like various elements to getting progress on this. I mean, no doubt, I was involved in the cochlear implant. I've seen people switched on, I've done that, and it's like life-changing, but it's only part of the challenge, right? There's social and emotional elements and so forth. So having the conversation, having the real conversations, the business model, it's a complex challenge if you're really going to look at it holistically. It's certainly not a technical problem. So, and I guess that's one of the facts that there's so much to be involved, so many people involved. Many people actually need to contribute to finding the solution, right? And that's sort of one of the elements of the adaptive leadership framework. It's the notion of enrolling and motivating people to participate in finding those solutions together. So to get that progress. So let's have a crack at that because the actual definition of the challenge is part of the leadership challenge, getting people to agree on that challenge. So do any of you three, anyone prepared to sort of give us the 30-second elevator pitch that brings together some of the views you've heard today that would just encapsulates the challenge that we're talking about?
Yeah, I can start off. And I think when I talk about conversation, I think the conversation's been led by people without a hearing loss And that's one of the biggest challenges. It's because a lot of us are frightened. I mean, I think people my age, Kate's age, there's a lot of us out there, but they're hiding. They're hiding in their workplaces. They're hiding in their family, thinking everything is fine. We somehow have this thing of, let's get on with it. We all need to look inside ourselves and take a leadership step forward and actually open up the conversation, because you can't have a change unless the people are leading it. And the people with the hearing loss and the cochlear implant, especially majority, especially those outside the deaf community who are doing a fantastic job in raising awareness. What about everybody else? There are 3.5 million, probably a lot of Australians there are scared to have that conversation. It's about time that everyone finds that leadership and start coming forward. That's what I want to see.
Yeah. So I guess that sort of highlights a couple of things to me, Dave, is that the way you articulated that challenge would be different to other people. So sort of getting alignment on what actually is the issue is one of actually the leadership challenges that's got to happen. What is the challenge? What are the facets? Who needs to be involved in that? But I also pick up another point from the adaptive leadership framework that just to bring this up, Dave, is that one of the key steps in the adaptive framework is about hearing the least powerful voices, right? It's the job of the adaptive leader to amplify those voices, to hear them and to make sure that they're part of the conversation. So, so definitely onto something there, I think. So, and by now, I guess, actually just stepping back, so there is time and that necessary conversation to deeply understand the challenge, to get those different perspectives, to bring people into conversations and so on.
Can I just add something?
Add away, Kate.
I would just say that representation, I think, is a really important word and really easy, I think, for people to understand that in the audiology industry, people like Dave and myself haven't actually been represented. You know, everyone perceives this issue as an elderly issue. You know, I grew up feeling isolated because I only saw images of elderly people, and that's because of representation, and it's within the industry and it's within the media. And so the more these voices are represented, and that includes the industry, you know, changing their branding and marketing to, I guess, adapt to the entire population, not just a demographic.
Yeah, so you'd like to see actually diversity in the representation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right, okay.
We live in Australia, and Australia is a diverse nation. We like to say we are. But the problem is the audiology industry, which I've seen for the last many, many years, due respect, we've got to understand that time has changed. We've now received better education. We are breaking new ground. We've seen people releasing books like Kate here, got people like myself walking in a corridor to Parliament and saying hello to parliamentarians and make them think about change. We have Mark doing podcasts and spreading information. We have a lot of leaders in our community. The real question is, who is driving it? Because at the moment, the biggest challenge in the audiology industry, you've got to understand, we have the NDIS, which I think is the most fantastic scheme. It's actually empowering us, the consumers, to actually make the choices. I know people don't like it, but you know what? You have to work with us, and you have to get diversity of representation, because you won't get anywhere if you don't engage with your people and the customers. What I'm seeing now is an evolution in this country, and it is time for us to lead the way forward, to tell everybody in our sector, have that conversation and say, hey, you know what, we could do this better. Because you know what, everyone says Australia's got the best audiology service in the world. I think from a consumer's point of view, it's questionable. It can be better.
Okay, so let's just take that a little further. So by now, I mean, we've been talking about leadership. So we're actually talking about like people who have got formal power. It's their job to make this happen. So I guess one of the challenges that comes out of this adaptive leadership frame, which I think is really powerful, is it actually considers leadership as a verb. It's an action. It's something you do. It's not the same as having authority or power, right? So some people have authority and power, but might not necessarily be exercising leadership, right? So leadership is an action and a verb, and so it can happen at any level, and that means that anyone actually can exercise leadership. And often people are exercising leadership and they don't even know that they're doing it, or they don't consider that they're doing it. Now, Kate, you and I had a phone conversation the other day, and we were talking about this, and you sort of went, oh yeah, but I don't really consider myself a leader because I don't have whatever, you know. So you sort of said, you didn't think what you were doing was leadership. And we had a bit of a conversation about that. So can you explain your reasoning for saying that back then, and what are you thinking now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I now completely understand the concept of adaptive leadership, but I suppose for me, it's not something that I hear every day because I work as an artist. I work on my own. I don't have a team. I don't work for an organization. So I had applied the idea of, or the term leader, to a team. Like I'm not governing anything, kind of a group of people. But after we had that discussion, I sort of realized, oh, well, yeah, I created Earshot because I saw a problem, and Earshot was my solution to part of the problem and to create change. And, you know, I've been working very hard for, I mean, really 5 years since I decided to make it, to try and have an influence or make change within this sector. And it's difficult as an individual in a sector that's, you know, led by, I've said to people, like, it's a beast. And I feel like as an artist, it's sort of difficult for people to take me seriously or to value my work. But, you know, I've seen the value within the community. That's why I guess I keep pushing to make sure that change continues to happen within this industry.
So do you consider yourself as a leader now?
Yes.
Having sort of reframed it?
Yeah, I think often us artists are a little bit humble in terms of being able to feel like we have much power. But yeah, I'm willing to acknowledge that I am a leader in this space. And
you sound a bit reluctant about that, Kate.
Oh, proud to be. I just want to see the change.
Right. So, I mean, that's sort of the sort of notion, isn't it? That, you know, leadership, you're enrolling other people into the cause, right? Like that's part of the leadership you did. You didn't necessarily have followers, but you're enrolling people to engage in the questions and the challenge that needs to be confronted. So, and I guess, I mean, leadership is not always easy, and achieving change is certainly not always easy. And part of that's because everyone in the system, like it's a complex system, right? Everyone has things they particularly value, right? And it's not what they say they value, their behaviours actually show you what they value, right? So that's a really important thing. So I value being kind to people, but my behaviours show, in fact, that I'm not, for example, right? So what people say and what they do, it's what they do that shows you what they value. And everyone has loyalties to people and ideas, right? So they sort of so values, loyalties, and the other thing, and this comes from this framework, is inevitably people and organisations will lose things that are important to them in any change. Right? Of course, they might gain something, but the research from this adaptive leadership area tells us that it's actually more important to consider and address what people lose than what they might gain, which I think is really fascinating, which brings us to our next question. So given the broad leadership challenge to achieve hearing equality is complex, there's big institutions, there's lots of things going on, who do you think has got the most to lose in heading towards hearing equality, right? Who's got the most to lose? And how do you think they could be enrolled to become part of the solution? So it's a double banger question. I can't remember who I suggested to go first. Mark, you put your hand up. Great. Well, there you go. I had you down. Go.
I'll take that one. I think one thing which really stood up for me when I did a podcast with Caitlin about 10 months ago now was that I think the biggest people who are going to really lose out from this is those audiologists who are just providing the technological solutions. Because once OTCs and hearables and other things in 5 to 10 years develop to a stage where 90% of the consumers who aren't complex clients or aren't needing full audiological support are able to get hearing tests and hearing fittings online, a lot of the companies who are only doing hearing fittings and hearing tests and sending their clients back out the door are going to be losing out, because if that's all we're doing, I don't think we should be able to command the prices we command, and we shouldn't have the influence we have in the space.
We being audiologists?
Yes.
Right, okay, so Dave, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm going to back up Mark here and sort of come in agreement with that. But this is an opportunity for audiologists to change the way they service. I mean, for too long, all of us consumers get frustrated by the fact we turn up in audiology to whacked on a new hearing aid or a device and then just say, off you go. We should be entering a new time with the technology, should embrace this and allow us time to work with your customers, time to work with your people. Think about the rehabilitation of the hearing loss. For too long, we hear people, in my role as chair of Deafness Forum, I hear people, a lot of people tell me they get the hearing aid, they don't like them, and they put them in their drawer. That's a waste. They lose out. The audiologists lose out. Here is an opportunity to have a conversation, to allow the consumers, the people to lead, work with the audiologist on the rehabilitation so they can get to use the devices better. Good technology is useless without the adoption of people.
Okay. So, go Kate. Yep.
I'm going to agree, but I just wanted to say that I think that there's a reason why there hasn't been that change, is because the industry have seen it as though they're going to take a hit, so therefore they don't do it. But, you know, in actual fact, if there's so many people that could be benefiting from hearing aids that aren't, then why aren't we trying to push that agenda? You know what? When you hear people go, oh, well, our target market is 50 plus, so therefore we're not going to try and target a younger audience. It's like, but they statistically say that people wait up to 10 years before even wearing the hearing aids. So I think it's time for them to take the jump and realise if they might take a hit, but I think it's a risk worth taking.
I mean, there's significant disruptions coming into the industry, as Mark pointed out. So disruption, opportunities. Like we're living in the middle of this COVID thing. So many businesses are rethinking how they're going about doing things and actually turning it to their benefit. So, you know, disruptions are both, you know, they can have their upsides and downsides. I think we're going to have to keep on moving on. That was really interesting. All of these are like little iceberg conversations, aren't they? Actually, there's so much more that could be explored. But it highlights, I think, that achieving change and making progress in this sort of thing is complex, and leadership at every level is needed. So here's another question for you. Let's see how you go with this one. So a key challenge to hearing equality is the everyday attitudes of people towards deafness, right? Hear about that all the time. Changing people's attitudes towards anything, actually, is really hard work. There's whole university departments on behaviour change and attitude change. And just telling people that they should be more thoughtful or compassionate, I'm not sure if that works for you people, probably generally not, right? So remembering that leadership is an action and a task, what do you think is the best way to practice leadership to shift community attitudes, to more actively support and include people with hearing conditions? Right? So don't tell us what to do or what can be done. Actually, the leadership, the individual stuff that people can do or organisations could do to help shift these attitudes. Who'd like to go first on that one? Kate, go for it.
I'm just going to be very simple, but I would say storytelling, which is why I made Earshot.
Yeah.
Storytelling is a really powerful way to get experiences to be understood, you know, without these stories. And that's what's happened. We haven't had a lot of these stories for many years told by us ourselves. And so I think sharing those experiences are what people need.
Great. Thanks, Kate. It's really interesting, I think, reflecting on being a former audiologist, I suppose. I mean, it is very scientifically driven. It came from the science background. So it's all evidence based type of thing. But the thing about art is it touches the emotions and it touches, you know, people, it activates something differently. So using sort of different ways of bringing people on board. Yeah, good contribution, I think. So Dave, go for it. Yep.
Yeah, look, I start what Kate was saying and I know what Mark was saying, but the real challenge is everyone has to look at themselves within. We have a very big fear of having hearing loss. Through our organisation, when I work with teenagers and parents and even young adults, the first step of leadership, in my opinion, is making that step forward, using change to empower someone else to accept you. For a teenager in year 7 in high school, for myself, the first time we had to lead, we had to stand up in a classroom of 30 others who are hearing. They're looking at us and going, who is this person? Walking up a teacher with a strange device and saying, can you please put that on, sir? You're talking about a 14 or 13-year-old talking to an adult and saying, can you please do that? On the other end of the spectrum, someone who's just lost their hearing gradually over time, going out with their friends and then suddenly realise it's too hard. They're so frightened of bringing that little audio disc or something that might support them, or even putting the hearing aids in and say, hey guys, my hearing's not getting fantastic, but can we do this? All of those little elements is the little things we need to do. And I agree where Kate was leading. We don't highlight the role models in our country. We don't share the stories. The future, I believe, is storytelling. And without storytelling, we're not going to make change. Because when someone sees a story, and they see a story and they look up to it, they will do it. And you have to look at all the evolution of changes and other communities making change. It always goes back to the human stories. We need more of them. And that's where this conversation can help us, every individual one of us, to look inside ourselves and go, you know what? I'm going to take a step forward. That, in my opinion, is called leadership.
Wow. So 2 votes for storytelling. Mark, what are your thoughts?
I think a common thread with all of us who are here is that we've all created a platform for people to be heard, for those who normally wouldn't be heard to have a voice and to have a platform in order to speak about their journeys and about their stories. I do it on the podcast. Dave does it on his deafness forum. Kate does it with her Earshot community. And Better Hearing Australia now, Soundfair have been doing it in getting people with hearing impairments together and allowing them to speak about what are some of the issues they have. And I think there's a real need for the whole industry, from students all the way up to the manufacturers, to start having conversations about what are the actual consumers needing, what are they actually wanting, and what are some of the stories and what are some of the day-to-day issues they are facing, and how can we overcome them as a whole system?
Do you think that are there places where the various element of the whole system gets together? You know, sort of you've got hearing aid manufacturers and, you know, people living with hearing conditions and, you know, organisations. Are there places where those sorts of interactions happen?
There are a few
stories, I
Facebook
think.
groups online, but I don't think there's any real formal things. Dave?
Dave, you reckon there's a place?
We do have interaction. We have a fantastic organisation, the Hearing Health Alliance, which BHA is part of the membership, along with Deafness Forum and other organisations. We've had the roadmap from Hearing Health. We've engaged with government. We're starting to move forward into Parliament. We're also starting to move forward into the mainstream media, through artists like Kate and the podcast by Mark. Going back to my point earlier about story, these are the stories that need to be told and heard. The other thing that needs to be it's going to be very tough. Audiology industry, audiologists and people who've been so long have had the opportunity to take us forward and give us technology. They have to recognise, and I think the hardest thing, it's like a parent with a teenager, to recognise the time that we've grown up, we've qualified, we've got the uni degrees, we've got jobs, we've got families. You've got to let us speak, hear us, let us talk, let us communicate, hear our stories, because if you keep going forward as it is now, you're going to create a division between us, and we don't want that. The only way we do have to do it together. And it is hard. We listen. We've been listening for many, many years. Give us a chance to listen. Maybe take a step back, find out what we're feeling, find out what we do. That's the way I think it's forward. It's going to be uncomfortable. But you know what? Being uncomfortable makes change.
Well, and I think that's, I guess, one of the key points we wanted to make in this session is that everyone can play a role in this, right? Like it is about enrolling people and moving towards a solution which is not actually known. That is the basic challenge here, is like how to best resolve this issue, this disparity, this inequality. How to do that, it's hard work. And some people are going to feel uncomfortable, but that's, I guess, what the challenge is. So it's probably a good point. We're going to have to bring this to a close, I'm afraid. I might actually throw a tough one at Dr. Barr, actually, because it follows directly from this conversation. Hello, Caitlin. Welcome back. So
really enjoyed it so far. Thank you.
Good. So there are many clever people in leadership positions across the hearing sector and society. So why do you think we are not generating the solutions to this challenge?
Well, I think you've touched on it nicely today, and it highlights that we so often think of leaders as people in positions of authority or who have a certain title. And I think what's really come out of today is that actually leadership is the role, the action that many more people can take, and perhaps it just requires a platform or sort of being facilitated the opportunity to show leadership or be leadershipful. And of course, people with formal authority do have the opportunity to lead, and I'd argue that there is some great leadership happening, but we can see that it's going to take more than that. It's unfair to actually put the whole pressure on people who do have authority. It's going to take more than that. It's going to take work from the bottom up. So I think actually thinking about ourselves as leaders, all of us, and that we all have a role to play, perhaps is the answer to that. More people need to be involved in the conversation and finding a solution that we don't know what it looks like yet.
Right. Well, thanks, Caitlin, for that. I mean, it's not an easy question, but as I think we've all agreed, it's not an easy challenge. So, so we do need to wrap up. I guess what my reflections on this is that we've obviously just been the very tip of the iceberg in this conversation. And we've highlighted that it's a large, complex challenge if we want to empower hearing equality. And I think we've pretty well clearly identified that it's not just a technical solution, right? It's a complex, adaptive thing. So where to from here? So as part of the email follow-up of this event, You will get access to a recording of this discussion. You can play it over and over again. It's probably a bit scary. But you'll also get an invitation to participate in the upcoming Sound Leadership Deeper Dive. So it's a deeper dive conversation, interactive. So unless we get hundreds and hundreds of people, it'll be an interactive Zoom session to think about these things and explore these things a bit more deeply. So, you know, we've heard and explored a little today that leadership is a task and action, not just a position. So, and nice pick up there, Caitlin, I think. And that everyone can exercise leadership to create progress and momentum. So if you're up for that, come along to the session. Now, and because part of the whole adaptive leadership thing is to give the work to the people, rather than me or Soundfair deciding what you need to support you in your leadership work, if you register for the session, you'll have the opportunity to answer some questions and to help co-design the questions. Also, if you register for the event, you'll get some resources and some provocations, including some theory on adaptive leadership. So the Sound Leadership Deeper Dive will include an opportunity to respond to people's questions and reflections on the homework that you might do. So we don't know exactly what the Sound Leadership Deeper Dive will be, because we really want to listen to what people will say to us, or where it may actually end up. But I guess the broad aim is to provide people with the opportunity to reflect on how they can make an impact in their own leadership and so forth. And who knows, people might get together, start collaborating, things might happen. So, so that's it. That's the next step. So I'd just like to say thank you to our panelists. I'm going to go, we're going to reverse the order of thanks to the introduction. So Mark, thank you very much for your input today. I really appreciated that. Virtual round of applause. Kate, thank you also for your willingness to share and your experience and your leadership journey. And Dave as well, thank you very much indeed for your input. I think it's been a really terrific half an hour, and I think we're probably a tad over time, but I think we've done okay. So I might now pass it back to you, Caitlin, to wrap up the wider session. So thanks very much.
By now you might have finished your coffee. I almost have. So let's get down to the actions. We want you to be part of this conversation. There are many ways you can support this and be part. All this information can be found on our website, soundfair.org.au, but in short, there are 3 things you could do today. The first is to join our pioneer movement, and many of you have already registered for this movement. You can take the next step to become a pioneer by clicking on the link in the email you receive immediately after this, or visiting our website, soundfair.org.au. You can join as an individual or as an organisation, and if you do, you will get the opportunity to co-create and do this work with us, and we will invest in you and your skills in return. If you're keen to jump into this leadership talk, this leadership work, we'll be running a Sound Leadership Deeper Dive in 2 weeks' time. Information will be in the email you receive immediately after this, or visit our website for more information on the events tab. And lastly, we're looking to partner with and gain support from anyone in the community who shares our vision. Get in contact with us as individuals, organisations, professionals, trusts and foundations, leaders, and we'll find a way to work together to empower hearing equality. I'd like to finish with a question, with a thought for you to consider as you go about your day. We want to empower hearing equality. We think it's fair. How does that sound to you?